Hi, hello, I am here. You are here. We're going to talk about navigating theoretical frameworks without feeling like you are caught in a torture chamber. Because I do know a lot of students wonder about like what are theoretical frameworks, and it feels so abstract. It feels like when will we ever use it other than like sticking something inside a dissertation? So I want to demystify all of that today. So welcome, you're in for a treat. We are going to have so much fun. We're going to answer all the questions. You're going to walk away with clarity. You're not going to be afraid of theory, and you're going to figure out how to use theory in everything you do. And that's going to increase all of your, the quality of your work, the texture of your work, the nuance of your work, the multi-layering of your work. It's going to be mwah, chef's kiss. Okay, so if you're here and you're here to learn about how to think with theory and navigating theory in your academic work, welcome, welcome. And just tell me if you can hear me and see me, because I need the audio and video confirmation, and then we'll get going. All right, let me go check to see who all are here. I'm going into the group. I am refreshing the page. I am hoping, today we have the same issue. The page doesn't show me, but I am going to assume that I am being seen, because last time I assumed that I was not being seen. So, and then I had to start again. But today I'm going to assume that, oh, look, the page is showing me. All right. Okay. Whoever is here, I see there are some people here. I'm not able to see the names just as yet. I will in a minute. Give me a confirmation. Tell me if you can see me and hear me, and then we will get started. Hey, Vicky. Oh, wonderful, wonderful. I am so glad that Vicky says hello from Chicago, and thank you, Messi, for offering this evening event. So very grateful. All right, thank you. And Andy, wonderful. There was a little bit of drag from drag lag. Hi, Saman, nice to have you here. And hi, Caesar. Hi, Anthea. So nice. Okay, cool. Because you know what? I asked you for the confirmation, and you all gave me the confirmation. And from when you gave me the confirmation and I asked you, there was a little bit of a lag. So this is going to continue on today. There's going to be lags, and I'm going to ask you to respond. So bear with me, because between ADHD and a lag, this is going to be an interesting conversation. So welcome, welcome, welcome. I am glad that you are here, and I'm happy to have this conversation with you. It's an important conversation, and I very mistakenly thought, because I had offered a Sunday live with the theory conversation. I'm like, it's already in the live. People can just go to the live and listen to it. Why do I have to do it again? And I am now realizing you have to do it again because there are new people here that want to interact with you live, that want to ask you the questions live, that want to experience the conversation live. So now I'm going to do a theory conversation every semester. I'm going to do a coding conversation every semester, and I'm going to do a writing up results conversation every semester, because these are topics that I find like people are coming up with all the time. So I want to make sure, because we have a lot of people here who are either new to qualitative research, or who found their way to qualitative research, or who are graduate students utilizing qualitative research in their dissertation, or who are faculty who are comfortable with qualitative research but would like some ways to sharpen and deepen their craft a little bit. So with all of that in mind, I think it's good to have these sort of refreshers, reminders, to have this conversation. Now, some logistics that I want to set up our conversation with. There is literally no specific time dedicated to your question, because any time is your question time. You who's listening, seeing, watching are my priority. So if there's something I didn't cover, I will do another one of these and cover the thing I didn't cover. But I want to be 100% responsive to you, because that's when I get energized. So anybody who has been to these lives will know, if you ask me questions, I light up, because I feel like, wow, I get to touch whatever the space is that is stuck for you and see if I can open it up for you. And that's when I come alive. That's one of my stronger skill sets. So allow me to use those skill sets and allow me to create an experience that is personally meaningful to you and to your work. So whenever a question will pop up, please ask. I have ADHD. You can't distract me. Plus I have a whole set of notes to catch up if I lose my spot. So I'm covered. I want you to ask me questions. I don't want you to have have to wait at some point in time to do this. So, and then in addition to the question asking, please feel free to like talk to each other, comment back to me, do whatever you react. So I kind of know that you are there, because this is a little bit of a different way of doing this. And I've been thinking about whether this is the best way of doing the lives on the Sunday evenings, because right now only it is here, but I do know a lot of people are not in this group but could benefit from it. So I've been thinking about migrating this to YouTube lives. Nothing will be different for you all. All you would experience is a link. You'd click on the link and experience the same thing you're experiencing now. I'm just talking about logistically from my end. Then I could reach a little bit diverse group of people who might not be on Facebook or on major social media platforms. Okay, with that being said, I am ready to get started. I'm ready to have conversation about it. All of those things. I do want to see if everybody is able to hear me and talk to me. Hey, Terrence, you're a nerd like that. Yes. Okay, so all right, so my name is Kakali Bhattacharya, and I kind of always like to introduce myself when I get started, because I'm always like, I don't know who knows me. So I am a full professor at University of Florida in a space called Research Evaluation and Measurement, and I graduated from University of Georgia from the program Research Evaluation and Measurement. And I am a qualitative research methodologist by expertise, and my research interest is looking at equity issues in higher education. So the social, cultural landscape of higher education is kind of where I play and do a lot of my empirical work in. And most recently, I will brag on this, we just secured more than $500,000 worth of grant from NSF, 533,000 and change, because we want to look at the transition experience of community college to the students that are coming into an R1 college in engineering education. That's where my PI colleague is. I'm a co-PI. It's a mixed method study. So we had like a quant person and I was a qual person for the study. And basically we're looking at like challenges, barriers, and all of those things. And we avoided all the terms that they have banned, but they're already baked into the proposal. So I am so excited to do this work and everything else. Okay, now let's get started with our stuff. So my own understanding of theory has been, obviously since my doctoral studies. So when I was taking my qualitative research courses, I was sent to a class, like a theory class, to learn more theory. So at that time, the course was taught by Elizabeth St. Pierre. Some of you already know her work. It's Betty St. Pierre. I love the classes. I love being challenged to think deeply. I'm already a deep thinker, so it felt like I had like found a space where I can like pontificate on stuff and its implications and everything else. So I was drowning and getting seduced by theory, because all the postmodern stuff was fun to me, because I was thinking like, as a graduate student, an international graduate student was what I was at that time. I was in the hierarchy of all the things in higher education. I was pretty low on the hierarchy, but theory gave me tools, tools to critique, tools to deconstruct, tools to interrogate, tools to investigate, tools to think with. So I was very grateful for that many ways of thinking with theory. And I was in a class where, theory was like sort of the foundational block to figure out like what kind of thinking you want to do, what kind of work you want to do, and how does it stays continuously integrated and aligned with the theory work that you want to do. So as I was doing this, what I learned, through this work is that the academic work that I was doing and the theories that were presented to me were interesting theories. But when I started to do the work with my community, because my dissertation was looking at international students from India and their graduate school experience within the first year of graduate school in US. So it's still higher education, is still equity-based things, but the theories that I learned weren't guiding me to land in some sort of cultural responsiveness space, because those were not connected. I didn't know, I didn't understand what theory was supposed to do, all of this. And even I will tell you, this week I drew out a paradigm chart for my class, my data analysis class. I drew it all out. I'm like, this is interpretivism, this is critical, this is deconstructivism, and I'm drawing this out. And my students were saying like, I understand what you're saying, but I don't understand what that means for the study. And I realized at this point, like, we all talk like everybody knows what to do with all these different elements of research and processes. So I want to sort of peel back the layers a little bit more and just start by saying theory is a way of thinking. And essentially, a well-developed theory ends up creating an organizing lens for how you want to think about that. So theory, because it's a way of our thinking, it's a lens, it's a perspective you put on. And that lens organizes like what are the things you want to think with. So like if you think of CRT, there are 6 tenets. Broadly speaking, it's a lens. And within that lens, there are some organizing principles, and those organizing principles are the tenets. So if you think of theory as a lens, then you'll get this, that everything is viewed through a perspective. Everything has a POV to it, right? So then if you imagine, like if you put on a glass with pink, lens, everything is rose colored. If you put on a glass with blue lens, everything is blue. If you put on a glass with, green lens, everything is green, or has a hint of green in everything, right? So now if you understand this is a lens that organizes the world with a certain POV. In our example, it was the color. In other theory examples, it's something else. So far, so good. Are you with me so far? And then I'll move on to the next layering of what I'm trying to say. And I'm also going to look for, hey, Donna, hi. Love because community colleges are such a rich path of opportunity. Of course, of course. I have a question, and maybe it's too early. Can you explain the difference between theoretical frameworks and analytical frameworks? Yes, I can explain that. And thank you for asking that, because I love your questions. Okay, so once you understand that theory is a lens, then everything is an organizing principle for the task that you're doing. So then let's talk about that. Methodological framework is an organizing lens around methodology. So if you say your work is interpretivism, that means you are organizing your work to understand something, explore and understand something. If you were saying your methodological framework is critical, then you're organizing it to interrogate, to disrupt something, to disrupt certain haves and have-nots, certain power structure. If your organizing lens, as in your methodological framework, is deconstructivism, then you're trying to break things apart. Some way, some foundational assumptions or something, you're going to want to break things apart. You're going to want to have critique of things. So that's, broadly speaking, is an organizing lens. Now take that and see what all are organizing lenses. So if you have a substantive framework or a topical framework, which is often called the theoretical framework, very loosely speaking, but all the frameworks are theoretical because all of them are driven by some theory as the organizing lens. But we do a shortcut and we talk about the topic that you're studying, a lens to see that topic. People refer to theoretical framework for that. But for the purpose of accuracy and for the purpose of, keeping things clean in your head, that actually is substantive or topical framework. So when you're writing up sections of a paper, if you use those language, at least for me, things stay clean. I have my onto-epistemic framework. What does that do? It's an organizing lens that helps me understand how I am constructing knowledge and my understanding of reality and being. That's an organizing framework for that. Methodological framework, organizing lens around methodology. Substantive or topical framework, organizing lens around the topic of your study. Epistemological framework, organizing lens around knowledge construction. Ontological framework, organizing lens around our ways of being and understanding reality. Analytical framework is what Terence was asking. It's an organizing lens around data analysis. Now let me give you an example of how you would put together that in a study. So I'm going to step back and say, what do these things do? Like, how do they function? Yes, I'm giving you definition, but do you have to use all of them in your work? if you are a qualitative researcher, you don't have to use all of them. Sometimes a few of them will do the task of all of them. So if you have so the broadest one, the biggest umbrella is the ontoepistemic framework. So if you have a broad ontoepistemic framework, then that's what is organizing the whole perspective, the philosophy of your inquiry. That's the POV from a philosophical perspective, right? So for me, for my dissertation, the work was organized through an ontoepistemic framework of decolonizing discourses. So a lot of decolonizing frameworks is where I drew broad sort of umbrella stuff for. So that was my ontoepistemic framework. Now, that meant that anything that I'm doing in my study, I'm going to be aware of the influence of colonizing structures, history of colonizing structures, effect of colonizing structures on each part, the literature review, the methodology, the methods of analysis, the representation, and make sure I actively disrupt it, deconstruct it, create alternative sort of ways of understanding things. Broadly speaking, that was something I would consent to if decolonizing framework was my, ontoepistemic framework. Now, number 2, then if you have the topical framework, for me, the topical framework was transnationalism, because there were people that were migrating from one country to another. So that transnationalism and the decoloniality became the way I was reading the literature. So when I was reading the literature, I was reading it, and then I was like, ooh, that sounds so similar to like what I've read in the decolonizing discourses. Ooh, that sounds similar to what I read on transnationalism and everything else. There was another 2 frameworks that I put together and I shouldn't have, but nobody told me not to, so I added it on. So in addition to transnationalism, I looked at transnational feminism and post-colonialism, because that also made sense in the context of my study. I didn't need to, but at the time, nobody told me no. So as an eager student, I was like, look, I understand all the complicated stuff. So I went because, teacher pleaser and person of color who thinks that I have to work 4 or 5 times harder than what is required to even meet the threshold of enough. So enough said, right? Okay. Then when it came time to do like the methodology, at this point, like the methodological framework, I didn't know what to do. I honestly didn't know how to put together my analysis or anything else. And then one day I was walking from my student housing to the College of Education building. And at this point I had lost all my friends because none of my friends wanted to talk to me because I only could think dissertation. And it's really boring to people who are not dissertating or even in academia. And then you sit there and want to discuss your dissertation with them. So they didn't want to talk to me. So I had very few people that were willing to talk to me at that point, So I would walk the 20 minutes and I would just talk to myself, often like look at the sky. So if anybody was driving, they would think I am mad because I'm just walking and looking up the sky and just talking to myself through that, right? So then what I ended up doing is in that conversation, in that talking to myself is when I realized that there was a way the people in my study were talking about their experiences and behaving a certain way in front of like college, their professors, their advisors, their department, and another way they were talking about it with other Indian international students. And I began to understand the differences because how they understood the power relations in each spaces and where they located themselves in that. So then I realized there was a front stage aspect to their performance and a backstage aspect to their performance. That's when I realized that I need to analyze the data with that framing, that ethnodramatic framing. That became my analytical framework. Now, do you always have to have an analytical framework? You don't always have to have it. You can use your own theory to create the framework. So if I just didn't have it and I just had transnational feminism as my framework, I could use elements of transnational feminism as a way to think about the data analysis. So when you're thinking about data analysis, what you're trying to do is you're trying to create meaning out of it and find pattern from the meaning you created out of it. So you're asking what is going on here, and then you're also asking what else is going on here because you want to be very comprehensive in what you see in first pass and then what you might not see in first pass. So that's like very basic, very fundamental sort of thinking. So when you're analyzing the data, you want to figure out what is going on here, and you want to understand the meaning of all the things that you're analyzing. And then you want to take the meanings that you do create and look for patterns within the meanings that you have created. And when those patterns crystallize, you end up having a theme. Now, for that to happen, you have to look at it a certain way, right? When you say, like, when, let's say you're coding, you have to know, why are you selecting certain things as codes? There's something that is happening cognitively to your mind, to your brain, that says this is important, this is noteworthy. Think in terms of like highlighting. When we read and we highlight, something in our mind says this is important. Now, if you have ADHD like me, the whole page may be highlighted so that it can be seen from space, because your mind says everything is shiny, But you understand the broader argument that I'm making is that anytime you're lifting up certain things to say this has more meaning, this has more weight, this is purposeful, this is significant, there is a cognitive selection that is happening that's telling you this. That cognitive selection is coming from some type of organizing lens. That organizing lens is your analytical framework. Now, that can be a combination of the theoretical frameworks and the research purpose and questions and the gap in the literature and your embodied experience. It can be that. Or it can be as specific as what I said, where I'm like, I'm going to think of it as an ethnodrama, so I'm going to look for ways to pull together elements of an ethnodrama from this, and then that becomes my analytical framework. I'm going to pause and say, Terence, did I answer your question, and does that make sense? I like perspective for explaining theory. Love, yeah. So Terence, let me know if that made sense, because I want to make sure that makes sense. And then the other two frameworks are representational framework and conceptual framework. So representational framework is an organizing lens around representation. And in the example that I just gave you, for me, that was ethnodrama. Do you need all of this? I'm going to type it all out over here. Do you need all of this? And the answer is no. You can have 2 to 3 and call it a day, because it will probably end up doing the work of all the things I just told you that it will do the work of. So these are definitely the different things I was talking about. So if you were to, if it was me now, and if I was advising myself now, then I would say keep the decolonizing onto epistemology, move with transnational feminism and postcolonialism, and then analyze the data as writing as inquiry and analysis, and ethnodrama as your analytic and representative framework. And then that is all, and I would call that a day, and we would be done. So that would be what I would do it now. I wouldn't have so many frameworks that I started with. I had like globalism, transnational feminism, postcolonialism, decolonizing onto epistemologies, then ethnodrama. Just too much. It was just too much. So all of this is that, the reason why I'm sharing all of this is because I now share everything that I could have benefited from when I was a graduate student or an early career faculty. So I want you to benefit from the hindsight of my experience, since hindsight is always 2020. So in addition to coming to the lives, there are some other ways you can also be more immersed in the work. So we have 3 co-writing sessions during the week. They're held at the same time. I have somebody who is, facilitating that. Just if you have writing work to do, it's really good to come to those writing sessions, and there's a good number of people that come there, and it's good to have those people around to have networking if you need that. But even if you don't need that, it's nice to have a safe space to come and have and body double, so you're doing the work. This fall, I'm going to attend some workshops and webinars. If those are of importance to you, by all means, show up for them. I'll put a link up so you can be the first to be notified. And then I have a deep mentoring program called S2S Mentoring. And you can also, fill out an application for that. That's a completely invite-only application, in the sense that you apply, and then I would invite you to an informal interview, and then I would see if there's a fit, and then I'd invite you into the program. So it's not like anybody can come in and get into the program. I want to make sure that I can help you, and we're aligned in what you need and what I am able to offer. So just in a nutshell, the program is pretty extensive. I started offering it since 2020. I have about 45 people in the program currently. at different stages. So it has some modules that you will learn, but it also gives you access to unlimited workshops. So you get to access a library of workshops that I have offered to my community, but you also get to ask for any workshop that you need that would be helpful for your journey. So like continuous professional development, you submit your work, I give you feedback. So we have people, mentees in that program that started at like when they were graduate student and now they're going up for tenure. So they got support when they were finishing the dissertation, they got support when they were going up for jobs, and now they're getting support to write up their tenure and promotion narrative. So it grows with you and you grow with it. And I felt like offering this as a mentoring experience because I just want to offer something that I wish I had when I was going through all of this. So it's kind of like a love letter to a previous version of myself. Okay, so now I want to be super interactive with you, and I want to know what are your questions around frameworks of any kind. So if you can write in chat, I'm going to type the questions up, and so that way you can kind of like see what I'm asking you, because I want to sort of like pause and take some questions and see where you're at. So I'm saying write in chat, what are your questions around frameworks of any kind? All right, Vicky. Is there a long-term plan that someone could develop with you, such as building up to being the best candidate for the S2S coaching session? Yeah, absolutely. I would say, Vicky, if you're interested, I'm gonna hold on. Let me put this out there in the world. Hold on. Okay. So if you're interested, check this out. This is the informational space. So if you're interested, check this out over here. And then if that makes sense, Vicky, then fill out an application and we're going to hop on a Zoom call as a result. And then, you and I can talk what that plan might look like for you. How does one visually represent a substantive or topical framework? Thank you, Andy, for asking that question. And Terrence, I saw your comment, but then because I'm talking, it scrolled down and I missed it. So if you can restate what you were saying, that would be very, very helpful, because on the back end, I'm not getting the full of the comment. It's just coming and floating away based on the live. Okay. So Andy, like how can you visually represent this? So what I would say to visually represent any type of theoretical or topical framework, first you think about what are the domains of knowledge in that framework, right? So what are the different areas that the framework connects? So then once you have the domains and knowledge, your job is to say, like, how do you understand those domains and knowledge to be connected? Are they connected via, like, this would be what I would do. Let me show you. This is how my brain works. So this would be what I would do. I would take, hold on, I'm literally drawing this right now here. Very, very rough drawing, but this would be what I would do. Like, it's not pretty, Andy, but I think it'll give you an idea what I am talking about. Hold on. Live doodling, that is not at all very talented at the moment. Okay, see this? All right, so this is where I would put like the tenets. Like, you know how CRT has tenets? I would put the tenets over here. These around it are the domains of knowledge. So maybe it's legal issues, whiteness, critical whiteness issues, racial issues, anti-blackness issues, whatever. Like the domains tackle certain areas, certain subject matter. I would put that in there. I would put all the arrows around and all the arrows going like this because it's iterative, and I would list the tenets because they are the sort of like the pillars, the anchors that's guiding all these different domains of knowledge. That's how I would represent it. But there are many ways of representing it. I would encourage you to think about how do you understand the relationship of the domains of knowledge, the tenets, and how they work together. Whatever way you understand it, that's the framing. That's how you would put it together. But put it together in any way. But that's my easiest, quickest, right, like just in time job aid if you wanted to do it that way. So that would be my answer. Okay. I guess my hang up is the analytical framework embedded within the theoretical framework, or is this a separately created framework that emerges from the data collected? Both. So if you didn't have previously selected analytical framework, then you can use all the ones that you already have. So you can use your theoretical framework, your onto-epistemology, and if you had a methodological framework, then that, and use all three in conjunction with literature review and the research purpose in question to analyze your data. That is your analytical framework. It's a buffet of all of these things. Now, if for any reason you're like, no, that's not it, I think I need a little bit extra, that's when you identify something. You identify it, by interacting with the data. You see something is coming up in the data or anything else, and you identify and you say, I think I need another framework. So for example, like, people can have like the theoretical framework or whatever, but let's say if you're doing narrative inquiry, you're going to have some narrative analysis framework that'll help you figure out like what narrative structure are you going to keep in your mind to analyze the framework. But that doesn't mean all studies have to do that. It really honestly depends on how you have set this up, how the flow is for your work. But there is no like right or wrong on this one. There is just a matter of like, can you analyze your data utilizing the things that you've already set up, or do you need something more than this? Is something else coming up that's a little different from everything you have set up? If so, that's when you like crystallize an analytical framework. Otherwise, the broad onto epistemology, the theoretical framework, and the methodological framework will do the job. You don't need to add an extra anything to that. And sometimes certain things will come with strings attached, right? So if you have feminism, it's going to be your methodological framework too. It's going to be how you analyze the data as well. If you have phenomenology, it's going to be all of those things. These things come with strings attached. So it's going to be how you analyze the data. Phenomenology can be your onto-epistemology, can be your topical framework, can be your methodological framework, can be your analytical framework, can be your representative framework. One framework will do all that job. So it really depends on the framework you're choosing, the research purpose and questions you're choosing, and then how it feels to your own thought process and meaning-making process when you're analyzing the data. If all of that can be done through the ones you already have, fine. If some of that can be done, but you still feel like I need a little extra, then do something else. Because at the point of my analysis, I was like, yeah, I have transnational feminism, I have decolonizing epistemologies, all of those things. But at the same time, I was like, but there's something that's happening in my data that requires another close lens, like very close, hovering right over the things that were happening in my data. That's when I had to do both writing as inquiry and analysis, and then ethnodrama as a framing device as well. So then I had to go a little bit further and deeper with it. But really, it just depends on, where you're at in your work and if that makes sense. Okay. Tell me, Terrence, if that made sense, because I want to make sure I have listened to you. All right. Any other questions you want to pose? I want to make sure I'm responding to all the questions. Andy, did I answer your question? I want to make sure if I answered your question. If not, please ask me more questions or give me a little bit of feedback, then I can deepen my response. Okay. Now, the next part of it is conceptual framework, and we haven't talked about that yet. So I want to make a point of, when do you write a conceptual framework? Is it before a study, during a study, after a study? What is the rule around this? Now, remember how I said that any framework is an organizing lens. So conceptual framework by definition will have to be an organizing lens. There you go, Andy. Thank you. Substantive and conceptual framework. Thank you. That is literally where I was leading to. Should we use different, Kamisha says, should we use different theories related to a research to develop a conceptual framework? All sorts of very good questions on conceptual framework. Thank you asking, Kamisha and Andy. Let's get into it. Okay, so conceptual framework is a framing around the concept. It's a lens with which you're going to look at a concept. When can you use conceptual framework? Before a study, after a study. So you can use it pre-study, or you can use it as a result of the data that came out of the study. Now, that is only in qualitative research world. In the quantitative research world, people understand this very, very differently. So I'm not even going to touch that, because that's not the work we're doing. This is the work we're doing. Okay. Now, having said that, before the study. If you have to do this before the study, then the reason you want to do it is because if you didn't, then you would land up in a place like me where you might have 5 different frameworks. I had to send back a dissertation because the person in that dissertation used 10 frameworks, theoretical, not, they didn't put together a conceptual framework, a theoretical framework. Now, what exactly is the conceptual framework that I was saying you can't use 10? Because whenever you use as many frameworks you want to use, you have to feed every aspect of your data through that framework. So you have to have your introduction through that framework. You have to have your literature review through all your frameworks. You have to have your methodology through all your frameworks. You have to have your ethics through all your frameworks. You have to have your data collection through all your frameworks. You have to have your data analysis woven, informed, influenced by all your frameworks. You have to have your data representation woven, informed, influenced by all your framework. You have to use how you respond back to your research purpose and questions to answer your own research purpose and question through all your frameworks. You have to argue for the gap you filled in the literature integrated with all those frameworks. So as you can see, I'm repeating a lot, but it's a lot of work if you have a lot of frameworks, because then you have to thread everything together. It's not like you can put it in a chapter or a section that's literature review and then call it a day. You cannot post and ghost. You have to do more than that, right? So this is where conceptual framework comes in. Oftentimes, you might find in your position that you like an element of this framework and an element of this framework and an element of this framework and an element of this framework, but not the whole thing. But a lot of this and a little bit of that and some of this is speaking and resonating with you. So one of my former advisee, Deanette Mullen, she was in special education and she's a Black woman in special education, was and is very, very white in terms of, or whiteness centered in terms of frameworks that have been created, and is not culturally responsive. So she needed something that was culturally responsive to the group that she was working with, which were Black, young Black children. So in that scenario, she didn't want to take every single framework that is out there. She didn't want all of CRT. She didn't want all of intersectionality. She didn't want all of eugenics. She didn't want all of critical whiteness. She wanted elements from that to frame a lens through which she wanted to look at the data. So imagine like you go to a buffet and you have this dish, this dish, this dish, this dish. Then you take a little bit of this and a little bit of this and a little bit of this and you create your plate. That's conceptual framework. You're taking a little bit of things from this theory, 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 and you are now putting them together in a way that creates your own unique organizing lens. This is like a bespoke framework that you're creating, bespoke organizing. You are saying the existing organizing lens as is not going to work for me. I need a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of this and a little bit of that. That's what you're doing now. Pro tip, if that is what you're doing, work early and very early to create the conceptual framework. If you have time, because what I do is I have a research class where people develop their own conceptual framework. So then what happens is I help them write the conceptual framework part out and put it out there to see if they can publish it. So then when you want to use it in your dissertation, you can cite yourself. Now that's a pro tip. Not everybody has to do that. You can develop it in the dissertation and later publish it too. You can do it that way as well. Because depending on when you're hearing this, you might not have time to do all of this. You might be like, this has to be a one-shot deal now in the dissertation, in the paper, in the whatever project you're doing. So that's in a nutshell. If you did it before a study, that would be the conceptual framework. Now, if you do it after a study, why would that be appropriate? So what ends up happening is after you analyze a study, after you do the study, you end up creating an understanding. And that understanding is a theorized POV, point of view, perspective. And you're like, this is how I see this transformation happening. This is how I saw the intervention working out. This is how I saw people change their narrative about what they knew before and what they knew after. This now I can put this pattern together in this sort of organized lens kind of way, centered around this concept. So in these things I talked about, like changing narratives, understanding the intervention, whatever it is, then you are going to present that illustrating like every part of that framework, how it connects back to the data that you collected, how it connects back to the evidence that you collected. And from there, you're going to then do things where you now have a framework, organizing lens around that concept that came from your data. And of course, it came from other things too, but primarily your data. And now you're saying, this is my gift to the world. I am now putting out this framework that is now going to be a framework with which people can think about this concept, and it's coming from this data. So that happens a lot too, where people do it after and they build a model, a visual, a mind map, a concept map or something, and create a conceptual framework for that. I'm going to pause and see if that makes sense. If not, please ask me follow-up questions. I want that. You need that workshop. I think, you know what, maybe there might be some critical mass. Like, we would have to work on it for a while. Like, I think it would have to be like an 8-week thing where we start, plotting these conceptual frameworks, then we start like pulling them together, then we pull it together, then we like, work it out, have people look at it, be super robust about it. And then when it feels like it's stable, then we begin writing around it, and then we publish it into the world. Yeah. Reflect, that makes sense. One of the themes that emerged from a study I conducted was rhetoric of fear. However, I analyzed the study through the rhetoric of UTAUT. I don't know what UTAUT means, but okay. I'm going to consider it as a framework. But the framework that emerged from my analytical standpoint was rhetoric of fear. I understand exactly what you're saying. Thank you, Terence, for this. I understand exactly what you're saying. So you're saying I had it set up a certain way, but then the data gave me something else that wasn't how I had it set up. So that rhetoric of fear can be a theorization you make at the end of the study. Now, theorization is making a broad general statement, broad lens type statement. The rhetoric of fear happens when XYZ happens, when people da. So you can theorize from your data, and that's not necessarily a conceptual framework. You can have a theorized statement. That's a broad general lens that's coming out of your organizing lens that is coming out of your data. But now if you want to create a conceptual framework, then you take that rhetoric of fear that you have, put the elements that inform the rhetoric of fear, and if you feel like that has certain tenets, add the tenets to the rhetoric of fear, then that's your model. That's your conceptual framework post-study that you can go offer. So you have to decide, is there enough to create a whole framework, or is it just a theorization from the data? And those two are different. A theorization is making the statement. A framework is like, this is solid enough that I can take this and apply to lots of similar things, and I think it'll hold, or we can test it to see if it'll hold. But so there are two ways. The theorization is something a lot of us would have to do after you analyze the data, after you come up with the themes, after you discuss the themes. You could theorize. In fact, it is generally like encouraged that you theorize out of it. What are your theorized insights? What are your broad perspectives? What are your broad organizing lens across all the themes that you have created, all the experiences that you have narrated? That type of theorization is part of good, rigorous academic work. Building a whole framework out of it is not necessary unless you think that it is something that is like super pregnant in you and you're ready to give birth to it, because it's not just the one statement of lens building or POV from the data. It's a little bit deeper than that. It's a little bit multi-layered than that. It's now if it's getting to be multi-layered, now it can be a model, now it can be a framework, now it can be a visual of that, and now you can do that work. So you can start with a set of framework and end with like a conceptual framework based on data analysis, or you can start with a set of framework and have a theorization come up through your analysis. So for me, I didn't have community of support as part of my initial setup. Then as I analyzed the data, the community of support became one of the things that was coming up in the theorization of things. Now, I didn't come up with community of support. LaVey and Wenger came out with that. But in my analysis, I connected to that. So I theorized with that as it expanded into a different theoretical space than what I started with. And that came from the data analysis, and that allowed me to juxtapose it into another theoretical terrain than what I started with. And that's okay. And that's completely normal. I hope I addressed it. Okay. Unified theory of acceptance and, oh, okay, use of technology. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Let me know if that made sense. What I just said. Okay. Now, some of you asked me, when can you use a conceptual framework, before or after a study? And then I talked about before and after a study. So let me know if that made sense. A couple of you asked me. Andy, you asked me. So the difference between substantive and conceptual framework is substantive is something that is already in the field. It's established. It's there. You pull from established, published things that help you understand the subject matter of your study. Conceptual framework is not something that is in the field. You're creating it yourself because you have a unique way of thinking about this. You think these pieces could be connected. You have not found something that connects it this way. Therefore, pre-study, you set it up that way, or post-study, you build it because the data told you a certain thing that makes you feel like you need to organize these in a certain POV, certain lens, and that's why you're doing it. Tell me if that makes sense, because that's the cleanest way I can explain the difference between the two. This is good, Golden. I need to work with you to have my framework that you first showed on the study. Awesome. I love when I can answer your question. You have no idea how joyful I feel when I feel like you were stuck somewhere and you're no longer stuck because I was able to clean the fog out. I love it. I love it. I'm a defogger. Okay, so what is the value of a framework? Theory is a liberatory praxis. So Bell Hooks said that theory is a liberatory praxis. Theory allows you to do culturally responsive work. Theory allows you to design, analyze, and represent your data in all sorts of different ways that might deviate from the norm, and that could be a really, really good thing. So let me tell you why I am going on and on about theory this way. We have a lot of attacks right now in higher education, depending on the type of work that you're going to do, and certain theories are now like the spawn of the Antichrist or something, right? So in those scenarios, if you still want to do the work that you want to do, you need to come up with broad, big, onto-epistemic stuff and theoretical stuff that is already baked into it, a sense of equality, a sense of equity, a sense of disrupting things that are harmful to certain groups of people. So then if somebody said, why did you do Sister Circle? You would be like, I'm using Black feminist thought. That is, Sister Circle is a congruent, methodology with methods of data collection with Black feminist thought. It allows the data to come through an agentic way where all of us are talking, where I am not the only one with power in the room as a researcher, and it's a collaborative dialogue that has sovereignty of the voice of all the women, and that is part of Black feminist thought. You should be able to repeat these things like it's water. It just takes the shape of you because it is the shape of you. It is an extension of you. You cannot go and select a theory because you think it's the best match for a topic. Selecting the framework is not a match work, in the sense that the match is not external to you, the match is internal to you. So you're going to have to sort of begin to think about, what is your POV? What is your perspective on this work? What is your worldview on this work? When were you first thinking about this work? How did you come up with it? What critical incidents created this type of research interest for you? That's your onto-epistemology without using those academic terms. That's your onto-epistemology. Your own personal POV about that work and what you wish to do with that work can get you closer to a substantive framework or a conceptual framework if there's no substantive framework. Then you start reading in that space, like anybody who has written about it. You start reading in that space. And then if you find a theory that like really speaks to your POV, really speaks to your perspective, you feel yourself seen in it, that's your theoretical framework. That's the framework you choose. You do not have to choose something that other people have chosen because it's a good match for the topic. It has to be a good match for your sensibility. It has to be a good match for your perspectives, a good match for your positionality, good match for your worldview. Then it'll feel like skin. It's an extension of you. It's a part of your ways of knowing, being, thinking, feeling, understanding, making meaning in the world. It's that part of you. Then when you have to integrate it in your work, it's not going to feel like an artificial thing. It's how you think anyway. So in your writing, it's going to be present anyway, because that's just how you think, feel, know, understand, process the world. So do not go for this topic, there are these matches. Go for like, what is your internal mechanism of thinking about this? What is your internal mechanism of, tracing when you first came to this topic, why you came to this topic, what was your passion, what was your purpose, what was your sort of trigger, what activated all of this, and then create a perspective from it, and then find a framework that is the best organizing lens for those perspectives that you already have. Then integrating theory in your work is going to flow very easily. And you don't always even have to poke people in the eye and say, I just use theory here. See, I just use theory here. See, it's just going to flow super, super easy. So I just wanted to make sure you knew that. All right, I'm going to go and look for questions. All right, awesome. Great explanations about okay, Kamisha, I wanted to know that it landed for you. Okay, all right, excellent. Now, let's talk a little bit more. So when you're doing culturally responsive work and somebody says to you, no, you shouldn't do this way, you should do it this other way, because they're used to it. They don't like sister circles. They don't like certain things, testimonials or whatever. And they're like, you need to do interviews and focus group and everything else. Now, how do you defend yourself from that? You use theory. You say, I understand what you're saying. And certainly in qualitative research, those are very popular methods of data collection or design or whatever. You say those things. However, in my scenario, I'm working with, name the theoretical framework, Brack-Fenwick's thought, CRT, decoloniality, postcolonialism, whatever it is that you're working with, right? I'm working with that. The tenets of that framework tells me da 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 da. So if I go and do these things, they are not culturally responsive, and the tenets require that I align the way I inquire about the study using a culturally situated responsiveness to collect data, analyze data, and represent data. What you're asking me to do would put me in misalignment with my ontoepistemology, substantive framework, whatever, methodological framework, whatever, and that will compromise the quality of my study. Therefore, I am unable to fulfill your request, because anything that compromises the quality of the study, compromises my credibility and my academic rigor. See this? Water. You can use theory to make every single argument you need to make. And if you have theory flowing out of you like it's your skin, it's a no-brainer. Your writing will be clear. Your explanation will be clear. You will have your writing will be very compelling. Your moves have clarity of thought. Clarity of thought in qualitative research is your currency, because you have to defend everything, because we don't have a formula for things. We cannot punch things into a computer and it gives a printout. We cannot have those things, right? I mean, it can give a printout, but it's not like a standard thing that we all do the same way, and therefore we should all have the same sort of guidelines around it. There are as many ways of doing qualitative research as there are qualitative researchers. So the justification, the goodness of your work is in your clarity, is in your explanation. So clarity of thought is super important. Having good theory will help with the clarity of thought. So let me tell you, where do theory play a role in each of your chapters? So when you are working with different chapters, or books, or book chapter, or manuscript, or dissertation, whatever, the introduction is, what organizing lens shaped this project? Theory. Some type of theory. Ontoepistemic, some type of theory. Literature review. What organizing lens shape your reading of the literature? How and why? Theoretical influence. Methodology. What organizing lens shape the way you design your study, build relationships, collect information, analyze data, represent data? All theory driven. A lot of other things driven too, but definitely theory driven. Findings and discussion. What organizing lens helps you put together the findings like this in this particular way with the kind of insights you have shared in the discussion? Conclusion and implication. What organizing lens allows you to respond to the research purpose and questions in this way, address the gaps in the literature in this way, addresses the so what of your study in this way. So every step of your work requires a theoretical influence. Whether you poke people in the eye or not, it needs to be integrated. You don't always have to say, this is because of the intersection of all three theories or whatever. You don't have to always say it. Some places you do, but you don't have to say it in every last thing you do, but it needs to be integrated. And as a reader, it can be seen. And if they don't see it, you can at least defend it to say, hey, this is how it is integrated, because that's your back end sort of design, programming, integration, thinking. So if anybody challenges you, you'd be ready to defend it. Does that make sense for each of the parts? Hey, Michelle, nice to see you here. Let me know if that made sense for each of the parts that we just talked about. Now, as I said, you can also utilize, theory to respond to criticism. So you can say my work is informed by XYZ frameworks. Your reading of my work is misaligned with those frameworks. If I do what you're asking me to do, I would be out of congruence with my frameworks and will have vulnerabilities, which will decrease the quality of my work, trustworthiness of work. These vulnerabilities would dishonor participants, co-researchers, and will also immediately called out by scholars in this area who do this work. Also, that is a way of saying, obviously, you're not in this area, so you're asking me to do things that people who work in this area would immediately critique me for it. I'm uncomfortable being complicit with my own erasure, the participants' erasure, oppression, vulnerability. So these are ways that you can respond to criticism by saying all of this. So we do this work in S2S all the time, where people like say, okay, I am stuck. I need a whole workshop on responding to criticism. So we will do that. Or somebody says, I need a whole workshop on thinking deeply about conceptual framework, and we would do that. And if you are part of it, you get to go watch those and also start requesting things that are super, conceptually or analytically or methodologically or theoretically or substantively connected to the work that you're doing. One of the things that we do in the S2S work that I wanted to share with you was we create our own framework. Like we create our own framework for our work. So what they do is they have every module, there are certain homework about their positionality, worldview, prior experiences, research interest, the purpose of their passion, why they do the work that they do. So there's a lot of written responses they have. And then once with that written responses, they analyze the responses, and then they do exactly what I showed in the diagram earlier with Andy's question. They create a framework for it, and then they create a visual metaphor to represent that framework. That visual metaphor ends up being like their fullness framework, like the wholeness, the fullness of who they are framework. From that, we start putting academic terms on it, because initially it will just have the raw data words from their own writing. And then we place, so I work with them, I partner with them, and we put like an academic framing on it. This then becomes the way they move. So it becomes, if you're a graduate student, then it becomes the way you're going to think about your study. Sometimes it goes inside a study as a framework. Sometimes they will use it to decide how to present their work at job talks. Sometimes it ends up becoming the framework through which they explain their tenure and promotion. My work is located at the intersection of this, affected by this and this and this, therefore my vita reads like this, and my teaching is informed this way, my research is informed this way, my service is informed this way. And it all comes from the fullness of you, that work that we do in S2S, so that you no longer have to think that this theory work is separate from who you are as a human, that those two are interconnected, and we can build a bridge. And even when we're presenting it in academic terms, even as a scholar, as a learner, that there is a lot of worldview, positionality, personal experiences, all are baked in to land here that now looks nice and polished and academic. But it doesn't mean that it didn't come with something that made you in how you thought, felt, moved, navigated through things. And that's when you're doing this with a lot of conviction, because you don't have to think about this in terms of now let me think like a scholar. You're just going to be, now let me think. You don't have to put on this performative mask of being a scholar. You just have to put on no performative mask. You just have to be more you, more fully you in your own work, and articulate more fully your own thoughts, insights, framing, worldview, perspective, however which way you want to. which will be aligned with whatever framework you're going to choose, because I just taught you that the framework is your skin. It's not an external match thing. It's your skin. It's how you understand and move through the world. So that would be the way you would move through that. Let me see. Okay. So the kind of things that I have seen, mistakes people have made in the framework, people want to find that external match instead of the internal one. So sometimes in S2S, when we create that map, that helps us with our ways of knowing and being. We then language the map academically, align all work to the map, job talk, research agenda, tenure promotion, book proposals, awards you apply to. It also allows you to draw boundaries. So in addition to theoretical framework, if you have a conceptual framework for your own work, then when you decide like how much things you say yes to or no to, you're going to look at the map you create in that program. You're going to look at the map and you're like, is this in any of the things on the map, or is it like a little peripheral to the map? And if it's a little peripheral and it's not in any of the things that you have created, you can just say no. No, I'm going to say no. And it allows you to not say too many yeses, because saying too many yeses gets you overwhelmed and burnt out really, really fast. And so I wanted to make sure that you knew that. A lot of times people don't know how to integrate and think with theory, but now when you understand that this is just you and more of you connecting with a framework that explains your way and worldviews more, you're going to be in a flow state for your work. So writing will then become a flow, and you will work from the zone of brilliance, and it's not going to be this torture chamber that sometimes people think theory is. Working from your zone of brilliance helps with like not feeling overwhelmed and not getting burnt out real fast, and knowing that you're setting up ways to defend the work using academic structures that are valued. Theory is highly valued in academia. It's very important to have those tools under your belt, and I want to make sure you do that. All right. I'm looking at the time, and it's 7:02 in my location. So I want to kind of like stop and pause and ask you all, like, was this helpful? Give me some feedback. And what are you walking away with? What's a nugget? What's a thing that is alive in you right now? Because that is my only reward for doing this, is to know that I prepared something and it landed a certain type of way. You don't all have to praise me. If it didn't land, it didn't land. That's okay. I can take that feedback too. But it's really important to me that you share with me, like, what are you walking away with? What's alive for you? And that interaction is something I value and cherish and respect so, so much. So tell me, this is what we call nuggets. Give me your golden nugget of this hour that we chatted. And I know there's a lag, so I know the answers are coming, and I know that I have to be a little patient and wait till you all tell me all the things. But I will talk to you soon with your nuggets. Let's see what you're saying in the page. What are you saying, people? Say it again. Say it again. Michelle, I haven't seen you in a really, really long time. I hope you're doing well. Terrence, yes, I'm beginning to think that maybe I should do something that is, that's that. Okay, let's take a look. Let's see where we are at. I know people are talking, people are typing, so I'm going to give it a moment, but I get impatient sometimes. Okay. All right, let's see. I do say thinking deeply as my theory as things. This was amazing. Thank you. The direction to do internal mapping and the articulating of theoretical framings. Yeah. Awesome. I am absolutely thrilled. I love doing these. So if there are other things you want me to follow up with, I will be happy to do this. I'm still thinking about making it a YouTube thing so that everybody can come to YouTube. So then because people have been telling me, like, I am not on social media. I don't like going on social media. I hate Facebook. I don't like to give Zuckerberg any data. And like LinkedIn people are like, we don't want to go to Facebook. We don't have any account, and I don't want to put together an account, So there are just people that are telling me to reconfigure this so that more people can participate in it. So I've been thinking about doing it in YouTube. If you think that's a good idea, let me know. Nothing will change. You'll just have a link. You're just going to click the link and it'll be the same thing. But it won't be in the group. It'll take you to YouTube, basically. Akosua says, appreciate how you explain theory as a lens. I enjoyed listening to the examples. Awesome. Cheryl, hello. You conduct rich, informative sessions. Your presentation today is aligned with guidelines I heard before, but I see people complete research and use different approaches. Yes, there are as many approaches as there are researchers. It's awesome. I realized that I would have done my published research differently if I knew what you shared today. Also walking away with internal mapping. That's awesome. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. I appreciate everything. I appreciate you. I appreciate that you're here. I appreciate that you chose to spend your time with me this evening. And I know everybody's busy doing all the things. And I show up because this is, you can tell, I'm so happy. I'm so happy. It's the highlight of my Sunday. Okay. All right. I will talk to you later. Thank you. Bye-bye.